Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com, and this is Disconnect to Connect One-Word Conversations. I am excited. There's a lot of things that's going through my head right now, and there is a thing that I was working on to kind of bring more structure to this conversation, and I realized that, you know, until it feels natural for me, this is what you're going to get. So, and I'm okay with that. And the main reason why is that, you know, our word for today is purpose. And so often, how purpose shows up is this big thing that we need to be concerned with, and that we need to be aware of. But I think it's something big, but it's not. It is different. So I'll just say that, because that's the other thing, that I want to have this conversation within the conversation instead of a side conversation. So I am going to bring in my guest for today, and we will have a conversation. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is such an honor to have you here today. This is the time where I ask my guests to introduce themselves however it feels comfortable.
Well, I know it says Reverend Marcia on the screen, and I just go by Marcia most of the time, unless I'm filling out paperwork.
Right. And then the Reverend pops up, right?
Yeah. When it's handy.
Okay, well, that's great. So how does purpose land for you?
Well, I was thinking in sort of anticipation of this conversation that purpose has been a journey for me. So it has come up when I look back on my history as a younger person, trying to find my way and not having a clue about what that might mean for me. And even some of the decisions and choices I made, or well-intending others helped to guide me to make, that for the longest time, they had nothing to do with who I was.
Right.
Why I might be here on this planet. So now purpose is anchored in identity, and that is anchored in self-discovery. And I think that's ongoing.
Well, I am so glad you went there. Is because probably a couple months ago, when I was creating some products that go along with my books, I created the U cards, and so I was looking for some I am statements and some you are statements, and you know, when I got quiet, I distinctly heard, you know, you are purpose, and I am purpose. And I was like, well, wait a second, that is totally different than how purpose has shown up for me in the past. Because for me, purpose was this doing, this outside thing that I needed to connect to. And I think what you were pointing to is that our purpose, we are our purpose. And the more that we embrace who we are, the more that our purpose will show up.
Yes. Yeah. So it makes sense that people flounder when they run around asking other people, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? Right?
Right.
Who could possibly answer that for another person, really?
Right. And do you think we're conditioned to look elsewhere for that, or why do you think that is?
Well, I think that over the millennia, we've been encouraged to disown our own identity and our own divinity. So how could we possibly be in touch with the richness of who we are if we're we've been encouraged to look elsewhere, to think of ourselves as less than whole.
Right. Yeah, it is. I mentioned yesterday on the show that, there's a balance in my life of the smallness and the bigness of my life, and recognize and being humble in that I am such a small part of, of the universe and everything like that. But there's a bigness to my life that if I embrace or step into, I can live the life that has been designed just for me. And the only way that I can gain access to that is, one, to be curious about that, be interested in that, and be on the journey of self-discovery. I just really, sometimes I feel that I wasted, a large part of my life, looking elsewhere, and being frustrated with, that not knowing or not feeling that I don't know, what my purpose was or how purpose would show up in my life, and being purposeful, in my endeavors. And was that the wrong way of thinking, or was that just how I was programmed?
My guess would be it's just how we've been programmed.
Right.
Really, and not intentionally. Just that I think perhaps accidentally, in revering others outside of ourselves, we overlooked the gem within each of us. And I also believe that is timeless and ever present and there to get to know at any age.
Right. Is there? I want to bring in your Reverend label, and because I believe a lot of the, I guess how I see the world, and through a Christian worldview, and there was this understanding, let's just say, that our spiritual leaders help us get access to our purpose. And so the more that we look to or listen to the spiritual leaders in our lives, the more that, they have a key, or they, or they have a more of an understanding of, of purpose. And so we must be in line with, what that leader is saying, or how that leader understands things to get access to myself. What do you think the role of spiritual leaders in helping people discover purpose for their life?
I would say it has thankfully evolved a lot. First of all, I'm a woman. Second of all, I get to be in a denomination of my choosing, one that didn't emerge until the turn of the century. So there's a lot of newness to that. But besides that, I think initially, way back in the very early days, even of Christianity, the spiritual teachings, and then others as well, were known to a scant few. And you would have to understand Latin and have access to education and understand Latin, or something else when it's not Christianity we're talking about, in order to have access to those teachings. So there was an exclusivity in a couple of different ways. Now, whether you're talking about the denomination or access to education or the freedom, especially in this country, to study and to interpret as one wishes, that's all evolution in my book. So I don't think that there's any longer a necessary interpretation that the reverend or the rabbi or the whomever is the only one, or the imam is the only one who knows. I think more in these times might say, gosh, it takes a certain kind of person to want to do that, and to be able to convey it. I think any good teacher or counselor is one who helps guide another person to their own knowing. I'm really dedicated to that. I'm not concerned about you knowing what I believe. I want to help you discover what works for you.
Right. No, I definitely appreciate that. I realize, it took me going through a very difficult time in my life to look at my spiritual journey seriously. I'll just say it, because there was language of having this personal relationship, with Christ, or having this, having your spiritual journey being personal. But I realized for me that there was this, okay, this is what I was taught. This is what people were saying. And that's, I have to believe that, there wasn't this inquiry of, okay, what does that mean for me? How is this showing up in my life or not showing up in my life? And so the more that I had to recognize that I didn't have a personal awareness of my spiritual journey. It was just, someone else's, that I started really embracing my life, as purpose, as, meaningful, as something that was worthy of I guess, discovering more about. And as you mentioned, earlier, reconnecting the sacredness or the spiritual of of my life, instead of just being just this human being that just kind of bouncing around and expecting this deity or or something to kind of one day pass some knowledge on to me. So yeah, it took a very difficult moment for me to get there. Do you think that's what I call the either it's a Saul to Paul moment, or it's prodigal son moment, where you kind of like, what the heck, and come into yourself and kind of return.
I think, and you could say, and just nod to Joseph Campbell, you could say it's a hero's journey moment.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what I love, is that, these stories are told in so many different languages and cultures throughout time, and they have common threads. So yeah, it took a very difficult moment. I was raised as a Unitarian Universalist and had a very active, regular church community life without a theology at the heart of it. And then I had my moment, and my surrender to things really not working out very well, and I had to seek help about that. And I ended up finding something to believe in that has still allowed me to be a free thinker, which was hugely important. Yeah, so for me too, it had to be a revamping. It had to be something that still allowed me to be an individual.
Is there? I think the one reason for me, I guess, and then I'll go back to the question. I think the one reason why purpose has been a difficult, or a moving target or something, or a elusive target for me, is because of the people around me, what they said about how I should show up, right?
Yeah.
And so when I would have this inclination to kind of step into something that I was interested in or curious about, I would have people around me say, well, that's not you, that's not, that's, why are you doing that? And it's kind of, and then then I would like go back and kind of like back into the laboratory or something, or I would take on what they say about my life, or what they felt that they saw. I mean, I recognize that people can be mirrors and can see more than we don't see about our lives. But sometimes, I think sometimes we look at their image of our lives our purpose or things that we're doing more than what we're willing to see for ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's, and then that's when, we're going back and forth. So I was just, I guess the question within that was, just how do we balance what people say about who we are and what they see as our purpose?
Well, that's something else that has been a lifelong journey, I think, of mine, and not mine alone.
Right.
I've journaled a great deal throughout my adolescence, even before that, since I was about 9, just trying to figure this stuff out. But I think one thing is the archetypal journey of differentiation, by whatever forms it takes. Is that thing of identifying who we are and being curious about that and moving in that direction. And we leave people behind. We leave our parents, our tribe, our village, our group, or whatever. And we do it in a bunch of different ways. So there are judgments from the outside about what we're doing. And sometimes we hold back in order to not rock the boat or to please or gain favor.
Right.
At our own peril.
Right.
So I think it's ongoing. And when we realize that discovering and being who we are is a natural part of life, and that we really can't afford to hold back on that.
Right.
I think as we get older, we realize it's okay if we seem weird or perhaps not everyone understands. It's still something we must do in order to really live.
Right. I've been using a phrase lately, to remind myself is that, I'm on this journey alone with others, and so the language that I use to help people, understand, appreciate where I am on my journey, will dictate the level of disconnections and connections that show up in my life. And so it is sometimes hard, especially when you think that there are certain people that, you believe should always be on your journey, always understand your journey. And many times that is, not the case at all. And so just like I said, and just this balancing that and just being okay with that. Yeah.
I was speaking earlier this week about this idea that self-care or self-exploration shouldn't be revolutionary. It shouldn't need to be a rebellion.
Right.
So again, one of the things I think we can do is support one another. It's never too late to start exploring and discovering who we are and finding a sense of purpose that's still there.
Right. I was talking to a group of my friends on another call earlier this week, and they were talking about self-care and how it shows up in our lives. And I just had to admit, it's like, if you would have asked me about self-care about probably 5 or 6 years ago, self-care was bubble bath and candles, and it's like, I don't have time for that. And now it has really shown up for me is the more that I understand myself, the more that I am interested in myself, the more that I know how to take care of myself. And it is different for everyone. I mean, it can be marketed any way that it's marketed, right? But we through our discovery will create the plan, the system of taking care of ourselves, and I think our purpose is all is in that. I've had people say in the past that, look at the things that make you mad or really kind of upset you. And that's a part of your purpose. That is something that will lead you to the things that you care about, and that you want to live in. And I think on some level, I kind of believe that, but I think my purpose for me, and my life is not, it's not a fight. I don't have to fight to like show up for people. If you understand what I mean. I don't have to say, oh, okay, I am such an incredible person. I just want to like, bulldoze, in front of people because I am so angry that, all that. I don't think that's a space that our purpose lives in. I think there's an ease and there is a grace in that expression. And there's a fullness in that. And I think the more that we embrace that, the more that it's not of the things that make us mad, but the things that bring us joy and the things that that light us up, that will cause us to kind of stay in our purpose. Am I on the right track? Right?
Yes, you are. You bring up an interesting thing that I think about, which is that I am very creative, and I understand that, and now I even have a purpose statement. But that when I feel that someone or something is getting in the way of my being able to be in that expression, then my primitive hackles go up. So sometimes I can become angry when I sense that someone or something is getting in the way of me being myself.
Right.
And I got to take responsibility for how much of that is made up, that I've taken on in my early life.
Right.
And also, I can turn that around and say, give yourself permission to go toward what you desire, rather than feel like you've got to move away from someone who's blocking you. It's perception is up to me, and then the experience shifts with it.
I get that, and it's it's all, to be honest, it's all about self. It's like too often, in, I don't know if it was a Christian worldview or societal, any awareness or any acknowledgement of self is seen as selfish. And so people, in some cases, miss the access to themselves because, nobody wants to be selfish. No one wants to be seen as selfish, or, there's a point where people, you can see, we have selfish behaviors. And I think there's a difference. There's a very nuanced difference between, being self-minded and being selfish. And I believe that the selfish shows up when you don't know yourself. And so you try to bring everything to you. Everything is about you. Everything, it's like when the little kids, the mine stage, that's mine, that's mine, that's, and it's like, because there's no awareness of what is theirs. So everything is, so it is, that's where that selfish behavior is, for me and my understanding. The more that I understand myself, the more that I have that discovery. When I am there, then it's giving, it's sharing. I'm sharing of myself. It's a total opposite. And so when I have self-care, when I go through self-discovery, then I can share myself with others. And I think for me, that's how I kind of have the distinction of the two for myself. It's like, okay, am I bringing things to me, or am I giving things, away? Am I sharing something? And then, we're all human. We make choices, in sometimes that are good for us, and sometimes that are not. And I acknowledge that, and then I have a choice, to make after that. So, does selfish show up in your life, or how does selfish show up?
Well, actually, yes. You have me thinking about something else too, which is something I learned from NVC, nonviolent communication, which is that unmet needs show up as us acting out.
Right.
So if my purpose is relegated to my shadow, and I have no idea what my values are, then I don't know what my needs are. I don't know what my priorities are. I don't know what to ask for of myself or others. And so I'm just one big unmet need, and I'm acting out, and I'm causing conflict everywhere I go. So I really appreciated learning that language or framework for understanding not just conflict avoidance or resolution, but gee whiz, I got to identify what my values are. And that means what matters to me. And so as I have learned more about how we tick, how we work psychologically and spiritually, how life works, I've been able to take responsibility for identifying and prioritizing my needs according to who I am.
Right.
And then I don't repress them. I don't disown them. I don't project them onto others and blame other people.
Right.
It's huge. So that's over time. I used to live as a terribly distressed victim. And now I'm slightly annoyed because I know whatever's going on is my responsibility. But anyway, like I said, it's a work in progress. It's an ongoing thing.
Right. And I definitely appreciate that. And even saying the, using the language of work in progress, sometimes I have used that as an excuse for bad behavior, right? Instead of on a reality of that within my humanity, there are some things that, I will have awareness of or lose awareness of, and just go from there. The other thing that came up for me, in your sharing is like, I mentioned about on some other shows about the creation of this program here, and me admitting to myself that I desired or needed to have conversations like this daily. And I was putting that demand on my wife. And, even though my wife loves me, she was like, no, right? We're not going to have these type of conversations. They take too long, and they're, my head hurts for hours after, or whatever, how it shows up. And just admitting that to myself allowed me the space to create something like this, to invite my friends to have these type of conversations. And, I think other than me being happy, me putting this together, my wife is happy now because, the pressure is off of her to have all these conversations. But we do this all the time when we have our unmet needs or the unspoken desires, that we have. And it's and that's the interesting part of that. And my purpose, me embracing that my purpose is to have conversations like this, is to live in front of people, is to embrace the curious or the interests. And the more that I do that, the more that people will come along with me and have these conversations also.
I am actually feeling moved to ask a question.
Okay. All right.
I'm surprised by that myself. I was wondering if you thought that not only do the relationship between unidentified purpose and then unidentified needs, which are therefore not put forth, and we end up with this, as we said, unmet needs showing up as bad behavior.
Right.
I wondered, it kind of gets into that world I was mentioning a moment ago about projection, about unhealed stuff in our shadow nature, and thank goodness we have lots of therapists and books to help us with that. What are your thoughts about how being out of touch with who we are and what our real purpose is might show up in our daily lives? How does that show up? Because I know those experiences led me to where I am today.
Yeah, I think for me, how it shows up and how I've seen it in other people is this this autopilot, or this or this way of just what I call set it and forget it. It's like, okay, this is how I'm going to show up, and we're just kind of go along with life. It also shows up with let's say addiction, but soothing, kind of, avoidance of something, doing too much of something to avoid, my life. I use that. I call myself a recovering overthinker. And I use my thinking to keep me from living my life, from sharing, from everything, because it was like there was always something to think more about this day. And so it's like that overuse of something. So I think the more that we don't, have an awareness of ourselves, the more that we're not showing up within our purpose, or it's a shadow for us, there is a draw. There is something that's kind of drawing us, but because we don't recognize that draw or that call on our life, we cover it up. We kind of, we self-medicate. We do all those other things because I don't have time for that. I don't have, life is going on there. Life occurs to me as this moving thing. So if I take time to pause or to stop or to, to think about this more, discover this, I will miss something. But the reality for me, that mentality of just keep it moving, I wasn't even aware where I was moving. There wasn't an awareness of where I was. There was, I was just there. It was like, there was sometimes I hate to admit this, my routine of driving to work, every day, there were some days that from the time I left the house to the time that I got to the office, I had no awareness of what happened. If somebody asked, hey, what happened on your drive today? I would have I knew that I drove there, but I had no awareness of anything that happened in between there. And that's how I was living my life. And I think that's how we live our life when we're not present to our purpose.
Yes. And again, I think that culturally we maybe we didn't mean to do this, but we have encouraged one another to minimize our desires and our needs,
right,
to adapt and accommodate until we're sort of flatlining.
Right.
And then we get sick. We get mentally, emotionally, and physically unwell. In my case, it was addiction that led me to what I've discovered and what I believe in and how I operate today. It was very much a response to ending up in a place where nothing was working, because I was seeking escape and substitutes, mostly escape for feelings I didn't know how to handle.
Right.
Then I learned about how, psychology and therapy and recovery and so on. And now the other part of the work that I do is working with people who are in the throes of addiction, inviting them onto that part of the path where things can turn around.
Right. And that is incredible work. And I think too often, because of our society, we don't even look at addiction seriously. I don't know if that's the words that I mean, but it is. I can see in my life when there was something that I was overdoing something and it was causing harm to me. If somebody would say, "Hey, Bill, I think this is a problem area. I think you're addicted here," I would go, "No, I could stop at any time. I have control of this," or and it was just like, no, you're not. This is like an unconscious thing now. This is a thing that you're doing, and you don't even know, how much it is causing you pain, or how much that it is keeping you from showing up, in your life consistently. And because we are so conditioned to, I guess, compare our lives to someone else, or someone else's situation. I would have, I'm not going to say who've said this in the past to me, but when, when there's a confrontation of, hey, you're doing too much of, I think you're doing too much drugs. I think you're smoking too much. And it's like, well, I'm not a crackhead on the streets. And I'm like, oh, whoa, how did we get all the way there? I mean, it's like, you don't have to be all the way there for this to be causing a problem in your life. But too often, I believe that the reason why we don't look at some of the challenges or some of the addictions or some of the avoidances in our lives is because there's a comparison of other people and what they're doing and or what they're not doing, and it keeps us from ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we can talk about this for hours here, but I'm sure there's a lot of other purposeful things that you have for today. Is there I will give you put up your website and everything like that. Is there anything, a final thought or anything that you want to share, people getting connected to you?
Well, I would just say the thing on the tip of my brain here is that I think what we were just talking about is this habitual numbing and whatever is sort of like being inside out. Right. The answer is to live, express, dare, risk, create, be, and then all of those cravings and those unmet needs seem to disappear. As far as us, we started with cafe conversations in 2019, weekly around Greenville. And then we started with Sunday celebrations here in Greenville in January. And with COVID-19, we've moved entirely online. And we too are just waiting to discover if we will land back in a building and physical space right away or not. And we're continuing 3 days a week with programming. I have classes on Tuesday nights. I've got a cafe conversation at noon on Thursdays, including today. And I do a Sunday celebration online. And we keep learning new technology. We're just adapting.
Right.
Adapting, the best thing to do.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I think, the purpose, shows up, when we choose to show up, because we are purpose,
Yeah.
And the more that we're present to that, we can go from there. I appreciate this conversation, Marcia.
Me too. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for having me today.
Oh, this has been great. If you have some time, I know you're running, and I will end the show, and I can say a nicer goodbye. But if you have to step out of the green room, that's okay too. But I definitely appreciate this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you again. I really appreciate being here today.
Okay. Bye-bye. Oh, that is great. What purpose? What is purpose? How is purpose showing up in your life? And can you embrace that you are purpose? Just sit with that for a moment. You are purpose. And the more that you know about yourself, the more that you embrace the journey of self-discovery, because only you can understand the fullness of who you are. That's what I believe. That's what I currently believe. And I am willing to have conversations with you about that. I am William Brown. We have some complimentary conversations that we have. So if you want to have a conversation with me about your purpose or anything that's coming up in your life to get a better understanding of you, I would love to do it, because the world needs you, the world wants you, and the world is waiting for you. So go be you. See you tomorrow at 11 a.m.